I was a staff officer located in a three-star headquarters called Headquarters IJC, ISAF Joint Command, the operational level headquarters of the ISAF mission. My specific job was the Chief of Exploitation, counter-IED exploitation within the counter-IED branch in the headquarters. For an embedded officer like me, which means you were going into a position in part of a larger headquarters, the standard was about a 6 or a 7 month deployment. The reason we're here is for the soldiers on the ground. Therefore, we really shouldn't get too wrapped up in our own self-importance or perceived self-importance. I turned up in the middle of summer, so the temperature's up over 40 degrees, and it's dirty. Environmentally, it's quite dirty. The atmosphere is very dusty, heavily polluted, and that's the first thing that hit me when I walked out the back of the aircraft. The heat and the level of pollution really sort of attacks your nose, and it takes a little bit of getting used to, for sure. It's always tough to tear yourself away from home. I think the thing I noticed this time round was my kids were just that bit older, so they understood me going away. They understood where I was going, the threats that environment held for me, but they also had an appreciation of time. As young teenage boys, they knew 8 months was a long time, so it was hard. It made this a bit harder to leave home. The Australian headquarters and the national support element have done a really good job in providing communications back to home. They've set up permanent computers where you can, Skype home, for example. You can ring home, so the opportunity to call home as regularly as you want is there. And for most people, or for me at least, I would make at least one planned Skype phone call home with the video, and talk to the wife and talk to the kids. And that constant and planned contact certainly made being away for such a long period of time a whole lot more easier and sustainable than even deployments from 3 years ago. So it was a lot easier. There's really not much to do if you're not working other than sleep and go to the gym, so that's exactly what they do. The US have a really good mantra, in fact. They call it a 2-3-7 mantra. You need 2 hours to yourself, 3 square meals a day, and 7 hours sleep. And if you can sustain that, then the rest will look after itself, and that is really true in a high tempo environment like Kabul. The fighting season, or the summer season in Afghanistan, is when the insurgents ramp up and provide. It's a busy time for them. That's when they are trying to seize the initiative and attack the coalition and the military. In the fighting season, there's a significant effort by not only the coalition but particularly the Afghan military and the police to really maintain the pressure and take out key targets, key individuals. Certainly around Kabul, where I was, there was a considerable effort and a sustained effort brought on and conducted mainly by the Afghans, supported by the coalition, and they were having quite an effect to the extent that there was a significant drop in insurgent activity in the fighting season of 2012 compared to previous years. The coalition have worked really hard in making inroads to defeating the IED in Afghanistan across the country. The key issue is our ability to be able to detect it and then mitigate against its threats. And I would offer that the trend we saw was the insurgents moving away from attacking coalition vehicles and moving towards attacking the Afghan military and police vehicles. The citizens, particularly women and children, paid a really heavy toll. Some of the worst jobs I went to was when the insurgents had attacked a wrong vehicle. All the vehicles look very similar. The people who wore the brunt of the attack were the civilians in the vehicle, and then all those civilians that were in and around the area. A lot of them were children. That was particularly hard to deal with. My contact with Afghans was really quite regular. I reckon I had the best job in the world. I was at a 3-star headquarters at the operational level with the ability to influence the operational commander. And then the other half of my job was actually training and probably more mentoring and coaching the Afghans. The growth of the Afghan capability, military and police capability, is a huge undertaking. I mean, you're talking about a police which really didn't exist a police force which didn't really exist 4 or 5 years ago, and numbers up over the hundreds of thousands, and a military which at the moment is better than 200-odd thousand strong. That's a huge undertaking, and given that a lot of the recruits from both the police and the army have a really small or low level of education, numeracy and literacy, the ability to train them to be competent in just the most basic of tasks is really quite a challenge. The coalition approach this time has always been, we're not here to conquer, we're here to support you so that you can take control of your own country and that country's destiny. I think the key issue with Afghanistan, one of the key issues that they have to resolve themselves, is the level of corruption. The reputation of Australians across the board, I think, in Afghanistan is regarded as very high. We have a reputation of being fairly relaxed, yet competent, and being able to maintain a relatively cool head when the pressure's on or when the whole thing's going to custard. The green on blue attack spiked when I was there, and that's a tough gig, because you work with so many Afghans. To identify one particular person out of a large group is a really tough thing to do. My experience was the Afghans were very embarrassed when that happened also, and they went out of their way to do their best to ensure it wouldn't happen as well. Because in the Afghan culture, that was very much losing face. I think the legacy will be the sustainability of an Afghan government, but you can't have an Afghan government until there is some level of security. And our mission has always been all about the setting of the conditions, i.e. establishing security, a secure environment, so that the Afghan government, the Afghan police, and the Afghan army can establish its way of life, its own government to govern its people. If that can occur, then I think our time in Afghanistan has been worthwhile. My perspective was that this has to work, because the Afghans who are leading the country now, and in my case the police guys we were working with, they have invested everything. They have bet their life and their family and their future on making this work. And when you're working with those with that kind of intent, you can't help but really respect the guys that you're working with. They're working generally with a lower level of education to us, certainly a lower level of equipment than a Western military would turn up with. Yet they're doing all the same stuff, and they're doing it at a higher risk daily, and there's no end in sight for them. I had a great time in Afghanistan. It was professionally very satisfying. I've got 20 years worth of training and experience, and at this opportunity, this deployment, I had the opportunity to really experience and deliver technical information. I respected the Afghans that I worked for, and after 8 months or 7 months of working with them, saying goodbye to them was actually quite a hard thing. It was almost as hard as saying goodbye to my family when I left Australia, because you had invested so much time, effort into these guys, and you really wished them the best. And part of me sort of wished I could stay there to see them through.